We'll quickly, we are delayed by around, I think, 8 minutes for our section to unfold. Our first session on the for this particular track is themed Women in Enterprise Impediments in the Marketplace. I warmly welcome the moderator for the session, Ms. Sachi Bhalla, Senior Program Officer, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, to take her place on the stage. I would also like to welcome and invite on stage our distinguished panelists for the session. We have with us Dr. Ishita Ganguly Tripathi, Additional Development Commissioner, Office of DC MSME, Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises, Government of India. We have Suhaila Khan, Country Program Manager, Second Chance Education, UN Women India. We also have with us Prashant Mandke, Head, Strategic Alliance and Partnerships, Frontier Markets Consulting Private Limited. And our fourth speaker for the panel discussion is Sonal Jaitley, Head, Senior Manager and Lead, Gender Equality, Social Inclusion at Microsafe Consulting. Thank you so much for joining us in this panel discussion, and we look forward to your perspectives on women in enterprise impediments in the marketplace. I now hand over to Ms. Sachi Bhalla for taking the session forward. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Meenakshi, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this panel discussion on women in enterprises, impediments in the marketplace. Though I think we will talk about a number of themes and issues which go beyond just what is traditionally considered the marketplace. I'll just start by a short introduction of our great panelists today. We have Dr. Ishita Ganguly Tripathi, Additional Development Commissioner in the Ministry of MSME. She's an officer of the Indian Economic Service 1999 batch, and in the past 25 years has worked in the Ministry of Finance, Planning Commission, Ministry of Road Transport, and Ministry of Commerce and Industry in various capacities. Thank you for joining us today, ma'am. We next have Suhaila Khan. Suhaila is the Country Program Manager for Second Chance Education and Vocational Learning Programs at UN Women. She has extensive experience in the management of large-scale transformational programs on women's economic empowerment, and really works to ensure that feminist principles are included to recognize women and what are gender-based discriminations or gender-based challenges to advance women's economic empowerment. Thanks for joining us, Suhaila. We next have Prashant Mandke, who's been recognized as the most influential rural marketing professional by CMO Asia and most influential agriculture professional by Agriculture Innovation Congress. He is passionate for building sustainable solutions for access to health, water, energy, and food for low-income households and rural communities. And he's been working really hard to ensure that the experience and the understanding of sociocultural dynamics of gender are included as we think about innovative solutions. Thanks for joining us, Prashant. And lastly, we have Sonal. Sonal is the Gender Equality and Social Inclusion head of Microsafe Consulting. She has been working with with Niti Aayog's Women's Entrepreneurship Platform over the past few years, and brings a lot of experience working with women's enterprises and looking at integrating an economic empowerment, financial inclusion, and gender perspective into various policies and programs. She recently led the Digital Economy Working Group for the G20 Ministerial Conference on Women Empowerment under Indonesia's G20 presidency, and we hope to be able to continue with many of the themes discussed there in India's G20 presidency as well. Thanks for joining us, Sonal. I don't think the audience in this room needs an introduction on women's enterprises and really what are the various barriers and challenges faced by women's enterprises. I think just an interesting framework that I recently read was about looking at women's enterprises and trying to understand, are they safe? And by SAFE, the acronym SAFE stood for Sustainable, Autonomous, have Financial Inclusion, and be employment generating. And I think that's a really interesting way about thinking about the various barriers or what are maybe some of the enablers that women's enterprises require to be able to succeed in the economy today. I think for our panel today, maybe I'll start with you, Suhaila, to give us a brief understanding, maybe just lay out the landscape of women's enterprises in India today. What percentage of MSMEs today are owned by women, run by women, and then maybe we can just continue from there.
Sure. Thank you so much, Saji, for the question, and a pleasure to be a part of this very interesting panel. I would begin by quoting the Ministry of Small, Medium, and Entrepreneurship data, because that is the data that we have available, which says that women at this point of time make up almost 14% of the enterprises in India, and 14% of all entrepreneurs in India, and constitute 20% of enterprises, which is small and medium enterprises out of the total 58.5 million enterprises that we have in India at this point of time. Now, but the interesting point is that a recent report by Google and Bain says that these women-led businesses has a potential of creating 150 to 170 million jobs, which are more than 25% of the new jobs that the Indian working age population needs by 2030. So look at the potential of these women-led businesses in terms of the economy, in terms of our growth of economy. Despite all this evidence, we also know that women entrepreneurship is very much necessity driven. We know that they are in low sort of segments of the market. In fact, they are concentrated in few sectors and segments that are not very growth oriented, and also they rely on local environment in terms of meeting their financial and technical requirements, which also sort of enables them to bypass some of the more stringent and more strict requirements that would also enable them to grow. Now, we all know the implications of COVID-19 on Indian businesses, right? Specifically on women. And there are reports which says that more than 73% of women-led businesses have been negatively impacted by COVID, and almost 20% of them have their revenues dwindled to zero. Now, when it comes to the existing interventions on women's entrepreneurship, we see a lot of focus on facilitating women's entry into the ecosystem. But we do not see many interventions that focus on really expanding those women's businesses once they are into that ecosystem. So then the issues of, say, for example, access to markets and the issues of access to finance. Now, we also know that pandemic has also significantly changed the marketing landscape. Now we are more into digital platforms which have taken over to the traditional marketing practices, including our e-commerce and social commerce platforms. Now, the challenges that women face, again, here also the entry barriers to these platforms are very, very minimal. Anybody can just log on to Amazon. But the issue is that once the entry barriers are resolved, how do we navigate these platforms? Where do we, how do we have access to those technical skills? And these are very, very technical requirements on search engine optimization and performance marketing and all of this, where women lack the technical expertise and the market the expertise even within their teams to navigate those systems. So these are some of the challenges. And one last point that I want to bring here is also the fact that even to access these marketing platforms, there are new systems that have been put in place which require them to pay the fees, which require them to pay the commissions, etc., which also has the linkages with the access to finance element of the entire entrepreneurship growth story. So I'll take a pause here, Sachi, and over to you.
Thanks so much, Suhaila. I think you've touched upon the various challenges faced by women's enterprises today, and thank you for laying that out simply. I think we'll come back to some of this, but maybe I'll turn to Sonal now to say, you've been working with Niti's women's entrepreneurship platform for the past few years now. It'll be really interesting to understand what you've learned about women's enterprises that have been successful. What is it that is working for them?
Thank you, first of all, for the opportunity to participate in this. So, Even before I talk about the women entrepreneurship platform, I would go backwards a little and talk about uh, the safe framework that Sachi had talked about earlier. So, what makes enterprises successful is when we look at it from a gender lens, we see that enterprises generally in India, women owned enterprises are not safe. When we say not safe, they are not sustainable. So, majority of women enterprises lie in the informal sector. If there are external shocks like COVID, demonetization, they're not resilient enough to come back on their feet. As Suhela just said, there were many business closures reported, more for women than for male entrepreneurs. So majority of women enterprises are not sustainable. So that's the first part of safe. The second part, there are estimates and different estimates that almost 20% are proxy women enterprise owners. So, and there is a large percentage. If you there's anecdotal evidence from bankers that most of the applications that come are actually for loans on low interest rates. They go to the businesses are run by male entrepreneurs, but they're in the name of women entrepreneurs. So there is as high as 20% proxy ownership. So they're not autonomous, real women-led and controlled businesses. The third F part of it is they're not formal. So these enterprises are informal in nature, they're not registered enterprises, and that in itself brings a lot of challenges with it. And the last part of it is to be safe, you need to be also employment generating. So as Suhela pointed out, that majority of our women entrepreneurs are necessity oriented, they're not opportunity oriented entrepreneurs. Opportunity oriented entrepreneurship is extremely critical in an economy because that is what leads to high growth and growth in high growth sectors which are very difficult to replace. So that's how the landscape looks like. So what actually works, and we've been working with the women entrepreneurship platform of Niti Aayog recently. We did a study wherein we find that uh, so what we find is that there are six critical needs, six critical entrepreneurship ecosystem needs that every entrepreneur has to be provided if you need to generate high and opportunity oriented entrepreneurship. These are very basic foundational needs. First is entrepreneurship promotion. The second is that you need to provide technical skills as well as soft skills, so training and skilling. You need to provide networking and mentoring. You need to provide access to finance, access to markets. Last but not the least, you need to provide robust business development services. So once you complete the continuum of support across these six ecosystem needs, that is when you create a profit oriented enterprise. So it is not just a function of access to finance. Interestingly, what we also did is we tried to understand that the government of India, as ma'am just laid out, has a host of schemes and initiatives to support entrepreneurship in general and also women entrepreneurship specifically. We try to understand what is the kind, where is this government support going, and the government support is majorly in the form of schemes. So schemes are the vehicle of delivery of support to entrepreneurs from the government side. There are a lot of schemes and resources that the government has allocated. We try to understand how are these schemes spread across these six entrepreneurship needs. And we interestingly we found that majority of the focus of schemes is on access to finance and training and skilling. Mentoring and market linkages are the most ignored needs. And the study also finds that unless you provide this continuum of services, which is across these six needs, it's very difficult to create high growth enterprises. And this is demonstrated by the winners of Women Transforming India Awards. These are women entrepreneurs who have access to all of these services in some form or the other, either on their own or through government support or through incubators and accelerators, and they've managed to create these successful enterprises. So I'll stop there. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Sonal. I think we should come back to some of the big points that you made, including what are the types of sectors that women choose to enter and why, as well as the employment generating role that women's enterprises could play. So Hela already gave us a big number: 25% of new jobs in the Indian economy could come from women's enterprises. And I think some interesting data that also exists about women preferring to work for women enterprises, or enterprises which are owned by women and where they have other peer networks and support systems. So I think we should come back to some of those themes. Maybe I'll turn to you, Dr. Tripathi, now on. We already learned quite a bit about the initiatives undertaken by the Ministry of by MSME, but it would be really helpful to hear from you also in the context that both Suhela and Sonal have laid out, government initiatives that are being undertaken to support women's enterprises, and what are the types of successes that we are seeing? How are women's enterprises actually moving and progressing? And in a sense, what are some of the challenges that persist?
Thank you, Sachiji, and thank you to all the organizers for organizing this on such a relevant topic. My pleasure being here. My colleague Mercy Pau has already given an analysis of what all schemes and programs the Ministry of MSME is running. So what I'll do is I'll just respond to the points that you've raised and Sohela ji and Sonal ji have raised. So I'll start with the data. So for us, for the Ministry of MSME, what we've been doing since the change in the definition in 2020, when the MSME sector definition was changed, it's now based on a twin criteria of investment and turnover. Since then, the MSMEs which have registered on Udyam, we are taking them as the formal number. That number is going on increasing, and Suhela ji did point out a few figures. I'll quote the figures from Udyam, the numbers that appeared this morning. So it's 1.35 crore MSMEs registered since the 1st of July 2020. These employ 9.72 crore people. The employment number is a voluntary number that the MSMEs are filling in. I believe that it is an underestimate. Out of the 1.35 crore that were registered in the morning today, 18% are women-owned enterprises. Out of the 9.72 crore employment that has been voluntarily disclosed to us, 24% are women employees. Now, on the 14th of September last year, what we did was to integrate the Udyam portal completely with NCS, the National Career Service Portal of the Ministry of Labor and Employment. Since then, we've seen that around 5 lakh enterprises which have registered on Udyam have actually accessed the database of National Career Service to see who are the employees. So it's like a job search. So they have searched and accessed the NCS, and out of those 5 lakh, 1 lakh are women entrepreneurs. Just to give you these figures, I thought that's how I should begin. Now, to respond to the points that were made about safe, sustainability, and autonomous, you've also mentioned about the financial access and about employment. So, employment will actually come only if the other three parts, SAF, they are taken care of. And now for SAF to be taken care of, there cannot be one single, approach. It has to be a convergence of all the approaches. And like Sonalji mentioned, there are 6 pillars that she's been looking at. We've been looking at something similar. Probably we call them by different names. So we've been looking at access to finance, access to technology, access to skilling, access to procurement, and also marketing. So under finance, I'll just give one example of each, and if there are more questions, I can take those up. So when we are talking about a multi-pronged strategy entailing access to finance, I'll give the example of CGTMSE, the collateral free scheme that we have for micro and small enterprises. On the 1st of December 2022, the rates have been brought down further for women entrepreneurs. The rates have been brought down for all in general, but more so for women entrepreneurs. The guarantee coverage is 75% for all other MSEs, micro and small enterprises, whereas it is 85% for women owned enterprises. If I look at procurement, procurement I'm sure you're already aware, and Mercy mentioned it a few minutes back. We have something called the Public Procurement Policy for Micro and Small Enterprises, which mandates that 25% of annual procurement by CPSC, central ministries and departments, have to be from women, have to be from micro and small enterprises. Out of this 25%, 3% has to be from women owned enterprises. Vis-a-vis the target of 25%, we have been achieving 36% quite easily. But the procurement from the women enterprises, which is supposed to be 3%, this change was introduced in 2018 by an amendment to the MSc PPP order. That year, the percentage was 0.15. We've managed to cross 1%, it's 1.01%. A lot of work needs to be done before we actually hit 3% and then cross the 3% mark. Now, on public procurement, we see that we have a decade-long list of 358 goods which can be procured only from micro and small enterprises. We realize that some of these goods are not even produced anymore, and some more are being produced, and this list doesn't have services. So now we've revised it. It's 460 plus, and we hope to get the cabinet approval on this soon. In case we've left out on some products, some services, please tell us now. We'll be finalizing it this month. Also, coming to marketing, Mercy did mention about the PMSS, procurement and marketing support scheme that we have. There, of course, for women entrepreneurs, the stall charges are completely subsidized, whereas for other entrepreneurs, it is not. So, what I'm actually stressing on is a convergence of all the initiatives that we have been taking. One thing which is really, really lacking is the awareness. Now, we need to take this up in a partnership form so that the entrepreneurs are actually aware of all the recent initiatives that have taken place. Two more points here. Uh, when we are actually talking about an entrepreneur benefiting from a scheme, that entrepreneur has to have some kind of an identity. When we say that Udyam is the identity that we are recognizing from the Ministry of MSME, we are told by a number of stakeholders that for Udyam, PAN is mandatory. We've taken this very seriously. On the 11th of January, our ministry has launched with SIDBI a formalization project where PAN is not mandatory. So the Udyam Assist certificate will be generated. It is being generated right now without PAN, and it can be used for priority sector lending and access to finance that you mentioned. One last thing I wanted to mention is that apart from formalization, a number of enterprises have been pointing this out, that to avail the benefits of Ministry of MSME schemes and programs, we need to kind of curb our growth. If we are outside the micro ambit, then we can't, even if we become small enterprises, we can't make use of the micro. facilities that you gave. Similarly, for moving from micro to small, small to medium, and then outside the ambit of MSME completely. So, some of you may be aware that on the 18th of October 2022, we brought out the notification saying that if there is an upward movement of a particular enterprise, all non tax benefits are to be given for the next 3 years. Till 17th of October, all non tax benefits were being given for only a year. Now, these are the kind of things we would like to take up when we do the awareness generation.
Thank you. Again, I think lots of interesting things that we need to come back to, talking about public procurement, talking about just ease of business for women's enterprises. Maybe we'll pick those up in the next round. I'll move to you, Prashant, and I think really getting to now the key theme of today's this panel. What are the impediments in the market? And what's the role of the private sector in supporting or advancing women's enterprises? It would be really great to hear from you.
Thank you, Sachi. I think the panelists have really brought out some real, key points. Sustainability, awareness, which ma'am mentioned, and Sonal had about 6 points, which are very, very important. I feel private sector has a very significant role to play in this, and it has already happening. The model is there. There are various ways they can contribute. Let me tell you, just get back in terms of how, on ground, a lot of these things which are happening, apart from MSME, NRLM and SRLM has put in huge amount of effort in creation of self-help groups, training them, giving them various, sort of access to various schemes. So you have district level structure, block level structure, etc. So this huge pool of women who is part of self-help groups today, in fact, there is a sustainability challenge. Because of limited maybe product portfolio which they have. Okay, and when I say product portfolio, it largely is into three categories. One is farm, purely agri. The other is trading, and the third is manufacturing, which I mean things which they make at home, largely. The largest, part where the women have shown traction is trading. Now, trading is typically where, again, private sector comes into play. What do you mean by trading is promoting products, services in the village neighborhood, which possibly private sector has. Now, that is happening. There are initiatives in place, but scale is something which is very challenging. The number of SHGs, if you see, is huge, but how many are active is another, big challenge. And how far can the state machinery keep them rolling in terms of efforts in capacity building or formation of new SHGs? So here is where I think the investments which are already made, can be taken to the next level through private sector participation. And that's very crucial because then it becomes sustainable. The other, area where I feel, private sector, possibly can play a role apart from, simply products and services, which is very much known. I mean, every corporate today wants to go rural and they want to promote products. And it's not a question of only the, the daily needs or appliances or gadgets. I think there are some fantastic innovations which are across sectors. I would say health, education. I mean, when I say health, there are deeper, things into health. We talk about consultations, diagnostics, medicine delivery. There are fantastic solutions which are available. If you look at education, it is as simple as that speaking English. Or it can be agri-tech, which is a very fast-growing sector today. And if you see startups, there's a huge amount of agri-tech, which is, into play today. Multiple things. It's not just giving, a sort of climate, readings, etc. It's much beyond that. So that is a piece which I think also creates an impact. It's not just trading to service household needs. It's also an impact. Like you create impact across thematic areas, and that's something which I think makes a lot of sense, and it is sustainable. The other important area where I feel is there are CSR funds coming into this, specifically this area, women entrepreneurship, where they are supporting developing entrepreneurs in their own area of operation or area of interest. So these funds are flowing in. So it's not only CSR funds which they play with, but how do you make it sustainable? When it comes to CSR funds, I mean, there are models which we are aware of. How do you unlock a larger capital? The investment comes into play for certain, let's say, 1 CR is invested. Once that is over, what happens next? And this is again a big challenge which people feel. But is there a model which can be something like a revolving grant or returnable grant, which some of the programs are already in place, but it is possible to do that. So this, I think, needs to be tapped in. The third area, and which is most critical, and which I would like to mark as priority one, is, do we have model in place, which is typically social enterprises which are there. There are players who are doing women entrepreneurship development across villages. In fact, one of them obviously is Frontier Markets, which I know about, and there are other players who are doing it, where you need a model which is tech and physical presence combined together. Because today, the highest cost is in terms of demand generation, awareness, or final supply, the last mile logistics. So do we have a model? I think there is definitely a model. I'll speak about it if I get a chance during this course, and I'd definitely like to make a mention about it. So these are the things which I believe will make significant difference, and corporate involvement, private sector involvement, I think will change the game.
Thank you. I think one theme which I thought would come up, but we haven't really spoken about, is norms, sociocultural norms, gender norms. And I'm wondering if anyone from the panel would like to actually reflect upon that, whether that is in terms of sectors that women and decide to actually enter into, or even things such as caregiving responsibilities, other household responsibilities that fall in a sense as women's work. Do you feel like that is also actually a barrier to the growth scale and profitability of women's enterprises? Any one of you?
Thank you, Sachi. The most important question, I would say. Recently, I was looking at the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor and their report. They usually compare more than 42 economies across the world and see how entrepreneurship is doing, what are the critical factors, what are the motivators. So, what they find is that gender, age, and educational attainment are the primary factors that decide if the total early stage entrepreneurship activity in an economy. Not surprisingly, India has one of the lowest total early stage entrepreneurship activities for women, hovering around 2.6%. Apart from gender, age, and educational attainment, so men are more likely than women to start new enterprises or lead existing businesses. Age is a critical factor. Younger people are more likely to start enterprises than older adults. Educational attainment is a very significant factor. Again, graduates are more likely to start new enterprises than non graduates. Apart from these three, what is cross cutting and what is most important is national context. And national context includes the cultural support for entrepreneurship, how social norms encourage or discourage women's entrepreneurship, and of course, the legal and regulatory framework. So, I would double click on the social norms part here and how they sort of continue to form a barrier for women's entrepreneurship. And I would start with a very small example of how the entrepreneurship discourse itself in India remains very limited to women in the rural and micro segment. So anything which is small is associated with women's entrepreneurship. Small loans, women entrepreneurs. Small entrepreneurship, you again think of women entrepreneurs first. So anything small is only associated with women entrepreneurs. We're not even thinking that India is going to be the largest, the most populated country in the world by April. There are almost 600 million there 600 million or more women in the population, and out of those, more than 300 million are working age women. Out of these working age women, only 20% are in the labor force. And entrepreneurship still remains the best pathway out of poverty and the best pathway into the labor force and the labor markets for women. And as we add more and more young women to the labor force, we need to ensure that we're also addressing social norms which are inhibiting women's entrepreneurship. Another very pertinent example in our context is women's unpaid labor. So any and I always say this, and I could be wrong, that the most difficult task in this world is to build a profitable enterprise, and other one is to raise a child. So women are doing both, and when they get the right kind of environment. So time remains the most critical resource for all entrepreneurs. If you need to build a successful profit generating enterprise, you need to invest a lot of time. And time poverty is, we know from the recent time use survey that the government of India itself did, that women suffer from time poverty much more than men, because they are bearing the lion's share of unpaid work in terms of care responsibility for the house and all other chores that they need to do. So, unless we address all of these adverse social norms that leave women with no choice, that stereotype women with, small, and that, they're concentrated in the traditional sectors of only manufacturing, we're not broadening our horizon and giving the opportunities for more young women to pursue entrepreneurship. And we also need to ask the right questions on, how many women are there in each sector.
Thanks so much, Sonal. And I think just to sort of also link this with what Dr. Tripathi was saying about public procurement and what are the types of goods that are in that list of public procurement. I think it's also important for us to see what are the sectors in which women's enterprises are currently clustered, and how do we actually think about procurement from women's enterprises, especially in those sectors. Those don't have to be limited to a small percentage. Maybe though there are certain sectors where there can be potentially much greater procurement from women's enterprises. Maybe we'll do one quick round of questions. I'll just ask one question for each of you to reflect on, and then we can open up for some audience engagement and questions. I think, Prashant, you said you'd love to speak about a specific model. So maybe a question to each of the panelists around specific examples of initiatives or models that you've seen that have worked to advance women's enterprises. That could be in, whether that's in financial inclusion, digital solutions, e-commerce, for instance. Or, I mean, I would say even thinking beyond. Sonal, you mentioned that capacity building and mentorship is not something that is getting that much attention necessarily. But if we know of good models, and they don't have to be necessarily from uh, run by government, but could be from the private sector, could be by civil society, could be peer networks that also continue to support women's enterprises. So just maybe one example from each of you, and if we can limit it to about 2 minutes.
Thanks. If you talk about what has worked for us, we find that when we take a very, very focused approach, it works. For example, during International Women's Day last year, what we did was we promoted registrations for women Udyamis. And within 5 days, we had 80,000 registrations. Suhela ji did mention that it's not the entry which is a barrier, but later. But what our perspective is that the entry also has to be facilitated, because that's the ease of doing registration, and then you can have ease of accessing finance and ease of accessing technology and the rest of it. So that's really worked for us, a focused approach. And that's where we have been creating awareness from our amongst our development field offices. So when the field offices get activated with an objective, it really works for us.
Thank you. And I would like to reflect a little bit more on procurement, because the potential of procurement is huge for women's access to markets. And it is both the public procurement, but also the corporate procurement. And ma'am, you mentioned about the 1% statistics, and this is also commensurate with the global statistics, which says that globally there is $1 trillion that are spent on public and corporate procurement, and only 1% of that is spent goes towards women-led businesses. Now, what does that mean? And how to correct that, and how to bring more women into that value chains of larger corporations, so that they are able to access those marketing opportunities. Now, at UN Women, we have closely looked this area of corporate procurement, and we have a tool called Women's Empowerment Principles, which is a set of 7 principles that require the CEOs of the companies to take a voluntary commitment to empower the women through looking at their workplace, marketplace, and community interventions. Now, when it comes to marketplace policies, our idea is to really see that what are their procurement policies look like, and what are the gaps in their procurement policies from gender perspective. We measure it through a tool which is called Gap Analysis Tool. So globally, there are 7,000 CEOs that have committed to women's empowerment principles. In India, we have over 333 CEOs. Now, these companies are large enterprises as well as smaller ones as well. So we took these companies took the tool, and 50% of them, we identified 2 major challenges that they face. One is bringing more women in the leadership roles, and the second is on looking at how to make their marketplace policies more gender responsive. So when we go deeper down into, so there were few issues. One, many of them do not know what gender responsive procurement means, which essentially means that you're also procuring, not only procuring from women led businesses, but you're also procuring from those businesses which are gender responsive in terms of promoting women's interest, either through bringing more women into leadership positions, or looking at their corporate social responsibility to invest in women, or having themselves just the policies and practices to facilitate women's entry and retention, promotion, etc. in their enterprises. So one was really the awareness among themselves on what is gender responsive procurement. Second, we also found that they were not tracking the data, that how much spent of the procurement was actually going on women-led businesses. The third thing was really around, where are these women-led businesses? Even if I want to procure, I want to know that how can I reach them. So really, these are some of the very valid and practical steps that needs to be taken to address that gap. From the women's perspective, and I'm sure, ma'am, it's not only for corporate but also public procurement, to see that how these opportunities are more accessible to them. I think one of the challenges that women face, even to access, the very wonderful initiative of the government of India, I think it's not in many countries that we have a provision where 3% is earmarked to be procured from women-led businesses. But really, they face the challenge of, how to deal, all that is required. And that also means that there is a capacity gap in terms of also producing those goods and services which require the quality that might be required by the corporates. So it's okay. I'm just concluding. No, I just wanted to bring this very, very important point here because of the potential of this particular aspect of procurement that is there for women's entrepreneurship. So very quickly, we tried to create a platform. We created a platform called Industry Disruptor, where the idea was to bring the larger brands and the women-led businesses in textile on the same platform. We got together H&M, Chibo, Bonprix, Amazon, Okai, etc. on the same platform, got the women entrepreneurs, and tried to create those solutions so that more women could be a part of those platforms. So I'll take a pause here. I'm sorry for that, but I think I have a lot to to share. But yeah, of course.
So I'll quote one example which is gaining ground. One is, it's the initiative called She Leads Bharat. Again, I'm going back to rural because there's a large part of rural and zonal. I mean, when it comes to entrepreneurship, women, it's again SHGs and all that stuff which comes into play. That's a huge number. So what She Leads Bharat does is primarily it's an initiative which is bringing together, donors, governments, NGOs, corporates, all stakeholders. And what does it do? I mean, it's primarily for those organizations, including government, where there are already sign-ups with some of the governments, state SRLMs, that to non-financial MOUs which have been signed up, and NGOs. Those who are already working in that space to promote women entrepreneurship, how can we enable them? Because we have a tech, we have the template, and can we become just the service provider rather than saying that, okay, this is my network? So it is just simply letting go and ensuring that it is totally white labeled, and the template is offered to NGOs which are already in working in that space, which is happening. There are NGOs who are on board. Why corporates? Because as I said, two aspects. One is the CSR funds which they want to invest in this area. The other is every corporate wants to go rural, and this is not a new story. I think everybody knows for last maybe more than 2 decades. Everybody has been thinking of rural. I mean, I'm not talking only about FMCG, but there are multiple categories who want to reach rural. Can the woman at the village level, get benefited by providing them the reach? When I say the reach, it is awareness, it is demand generation, it is last mile logistics. And this woman plays a very important role because she is an influencer, she is a good communicator, she is a good mobilizer. And if she is not, then there is a training module which is already in place, because these are the things which one would require. Government, I already spoke about, NGOs, corporates, and there are joint fundraise efforts which are happening, because primarily end of the day, if you need to fund the first level of transition, let's say from 1 to 2, there will definitely be certain funds required, and then you make it sustainable. You don't really need to depend on the donor funds. So that's where Frontier has come out with this concept of She Leads Bharat, and we're gaining traction. Thank you.
Thank you. So, there are so many good practices and examples, but of course, I would say that the Women Entrepreneurship Platform of Niti Aayog is a unique model in itself, because it is the only national platform which is a public-private partnership. It actually brings together a lot of public-private resources to ensure that women entrepreneurs are provided support across all critical needs. So, all the 6 critical needs that I mentioned, Women Entrepreneurship Platform is making all efforts to provide support to women entrepreneurs across all of those needs. It is creating women role models. So, across its years of existence, it has facilitated women entrepreneurs who are performing exceedingly well through the Women Transforming India Awards, and these women entrepreneurs are role models in itself. They also have a community, and this community helps not just in peer networking but also sharing learning experiences with each other. Many women entrepreneurs who are part of the WEP platform are also communicating with each other to see where are the market opportunities that exist within this network itself. So a lot happens when you give support to women entrepreneurs, bring them together and connect them to larger networks. So connecting them to networks and markets is extremely important. And the last thing I would say, that India has done extremely well in creating a very robust startup ecosystem. So we are the third largest startup ecosystem, and we have more than, I would say, 500 incubators and accelerators across the country. So they again provide a very good model of how do you support incubation and acceleration of an enterprise. Just like a child needs, the first 1000 days are extremely critical to promote their cognitive and health development overall. Similarly, I would say that for an entrepreneur, the early stages are extremely important, and incubators and accelerators could provide that very critical support in this early stage of entrepreneurship. And we need more women focused incubators and accelerators.
Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists. I think the two big takeaways that I've got from this is, One, the importance of having a clear goal and single-minded focus to be able to achieve that goal. But second, the importance of convergence, of bringing multiple stakeholders together towards that goal. It's not something that's going to happen with just one set of stakeholders. And I think maybe something for us to sort of take away also is how do we work better across government, civil society, donors, CSR, and private sector. Maybe with that, we open up to the audience for any questions. Please, if you could keep it brief and also mention if there's a specific panelist that you would like to answer the question.
Hi, maybe I can ask a question. I don't think I need a mic. We talked about the impediments, and one of the impediments that came across was the social norms, which is about the care, the child care and the elder care work that the women take up. That's the kind of an unpaid labor that we talked about. Any good examples to share about the care infrastructure, the care economy that we all are working towards, an impediment to take care of, which is not talked about, which is started talking about rather after the COVID, but nobody is kind of working towards it. Any good examples to share that we all can kind of emulate in our work? Thank you.
Should we take a couple of questions and then come back to this?
Thank you. A very good question. In fact, it's extremely critical to simultaneously work towards creating a care infrastructure. The United States has actually classified care as essential infrastructure. So there are very good examples. For example, Seva has a Sangini cooperative, which is a very good model of providing care to low income women workers. It's a model of affordable care and creches that work with low income workers. So that is one. Again, mobile creches does some amazing work for providing care facilities for construction workers, etc. So there are many models, but we need to experiment and provide it on a large scale.
I just want to add also the employment generation potential of care economy, because that is also documented and it has a tremendous potential. Now, one thing that we did was really to see, to marry the two, the care sector and entrepreneurship. So at UN Women, we did an accelerator program where we invited the call for applications for those enterprises that are providing care services, to really to incubate them and provide them with access to finance and access to and better linkages to how they can grow their enterprises. I'll be happy to share and connect offline if you would like to learn more about that.
And not to mention that we have legislation around this. We have the Maternity Benefits Act, which also calls for all organizations with more than 50 employees to create care infrastructure or make available access to creches. And that's 50 employees regardless of gender of the employee. So any further questions?
Yeah. My name is Upasna and I represent Resham Sutra. We work with self-help groups in Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha, Bengal, and we enable these women to adopt solar-powered machines to, add on value to the local forest product or the farming product from the silk industry, the cocoons. So our experience so far has been that we create awareness, we do capacity building, we do training, but sometimes there is a small lag in the market connect. For example, the supply of the raw material. So if the cocoons are not available, it comes to a standstill. And then these women go on to farms to work. So they have an alternative source of income, which has been very, has been there, which is low paying and erratic. So how do we, get these women to understand that they have to really stick to what we are training them with? Of course, there are some lacunae from our end also, that there is a shortage of supply, the raw material. We have made cocoon banks, but again, because it's a agri-forest product, there are shortages. So that's my question to the panel. How do we make them more sticky to the new livelihood opportunities they pick up.
Thank you. Maybe we'll take a couple more questions before coming back to.
I'm Avnish. In the agriculture sector, we have this FPOs. So, would you classify these MSMEs, these FPOs as the MSC thing beneficiaries? Would you give them loans or something?
And there was another question at the back.
So the thing is that most of the time we see that entrepreneurship led by the rural women, somehow sometimes they manage to generate demands or something, or even they are able manage to handle each and everything. When we talk about the business scalability and we talk about the clubbing of the peer groups or peer kind of business, so what could be the way forward? Because in that situation most of the time men-led business entrepreneurship, they are very much well off, you can say, to incorporate all sorts of resources that could be complementary to each other. But in relation to women entrepreneurship, either it could be to especially related to the rural India, we most of the time find that they are not able to, even they have a good products that is actually has the demand also, but not able to connect other both side, the demand and supply side. So what could be the way forward for those especially women entrepreneurs hailing from the rural India could get to the actual market which is really demanding over the globe? So thank you.
So, three questions. One is around making sure that women stay with the enterprises that they are being trained for, and sort of continue, because there will be a greater sort of income generation from them. Second is around FPOs. Are they considered MSMEs? Are they eligible for loans? And the third around better synergy between demand and supply for women's enterprises. So, any preferences?
I think Upasana ji's question is very interesting, and actually, it's a very serious challenge at times. How do you get traction and keep them focused? And I've seen this happening very regularly. I mean, that's primarily because till the time they become really productive in terms of getting consistent income, there is always that high insecurity in their minds. If I invest time on this, will I get something out of it? Or if I do something else, I'll get. And so they go for more assured thing. It can be as simple as labor, right? As simple as labor. And you cannot guarantee income because obvious reasons. You cannot say, I'll pay you so much. So what I have seen is building alternative income stream makes sense. And this has been the case. Like telling them that only do this becomes very restrictive, and that builds that insecurity in their minds. However, if we say, okay, apart from this, this could be another one or two things. And it is, again, a lot of things are seasonal. I mean, typically, I'm sure your business is seasonal, where there is a high demand in particular quarters and low demand. So how do you sustain in the low demand phase? That's where one needs to look at what else can they do, which is not in conflict with what you are doing, number one, which utilizes their skills and interest, and which most importantly also meets demands in the neighborhood stroke local markets. So there are such things possible, like a woman who is doing the kind of a task which you give them. They could be good at one or two things apart from that, right? So do you want to build an allied stream or allied kind of a thing? So your proposition becomes that, okay, throughout the year, either you do 1, 2, or 3, your income levels can be sustained. I mean,
I also, if I may just add to that and look this question a little bit differently, to say that why we would want them to stick to any one thing. And I'm challenging this at this point of time, but really thinking aloud to the fact that women's lives, all of us do multitask, right? All of us do activities where we find value. So if women are also seeking other opportunities, where do they think that it is good for income generation or for learning or gaining more skills? We should be, they should have that choice open to them. And how we can then best strategize to make sure that the choice that they are trying to make, or the need that they have, is addressed in addition to what you are. Thank you.
Thanks. Um, Suhela ji and Prashant ji have already answered your question, ma'am, but I wanted to add that SHGs do register on the Udyam portal as MSMEs, and we have more than a lakh of SHGs registered with an employment of 12 lakh. So maybe you could see what are the benefits of registering them as MSMEs, and then maybe you can retain them in the sector you want them to be retained in. You could explore that. Yeah. So you had raised the question about FPOs. Now, like I mentioned, the basic qualification for basic eligibility for any loan or any scheme is whether you have an Udyam registration certificate. So I would suggest you go to the Udyam portal, see in the drop down menu, agriculture will not be there, but agriculture processed things, they will be there. You could register yourself as an FPO. Cooperatives also register themselves. We have about 10,000 cooperatives who are availing benefits of various schemes. Um, yeah, absolutely, sir. Agreed, sir. But the activity they are engaged in has to be related to, it may be related to agriculture. It cannot be only agriculture then, because MSME is a part of industry, right? Yeah.
So maybe we can pick this up
Sure, sure.
after the panel.
So you had a question about market access. Where are you? So I can't. There you are. Market access for rural women, sir. So the product that you are talking about, are they for the domestic market, or these are export market that you are seeking?
Because there are various challenges. The thing is that once the product is good, then they are failing to supply at local level to consume at this level, and when the demand is very high, they are not able to fulfill maintain the supply chain management. So these are the there are different level of challenges. And if you talk about the export market, and there is also a kind of different kind of challenges, statutory compliances, documentations, finding partner, business partners or exporters. These are the different level of challenges for those, especially even the for export market challenge for the male dominating entrepreneurship as well, because we are also in it. Because, so I can understand the for women, because they are very lacking, not very lacking we can say, but somehow there is a difference between clubbing those people, taking them into one place and getting things smoothly, so that we can create a proper supply chain management as the business led by the male. So that is the difference. So
Absolutely, sir. So, why I asked is, so we have specific interventions for market access within the domestic, within the country, and specific interventions for market access, external market. So, if there are any particular, particular area that you're looking at, geographical area, I can put you in touch with our field office who will facilitate that, the issues that you're facing, sir.
thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I think we're out of time. So maybe after this panel, we could connect outside and take questions that others had. Maybe I'm just going to, I don't even think we have time for like wrap up comments at this point. Meenakshi, do we have 2 minutes? We have 2 minutes? Okay. So literally like 30 seconds each to say if there was one policy shift or your wish for like better policy implementation to ensure women's enterprises are able to grow, scale, are more profitable, are safe. Ma'am, should we start with you?
Ma'am, for me, since I am doing the policy, I would rather listen to everyone else and then take it as a stakeholder consultation and then do the policy changes. But yes, we take our stakeholder consultations very seriously. And please, if you have any suggestions, tell us now.
So, Suhela, 30 seconds.
Okay. So no, I would like to say that more equal focus on mid-level enterprises to really look at their needs for expansion and growth, but also procurement policies. More women in senior positions in the procurement roles and also looking at mainstreaming gender in the procurement policies. Yeah.
Thank you.
My suggestion is looking at engaging private sector more effectively and being open in terms of giving them certain roles to lead. I mean, certain things to be, led by them within the framework of government. I mean, it can be non-financial purely, but I would stress upon considering this.
I'll try to stick to the 30 seconds with three things that I have. So one is better sex disaggregated data on the kind and quality of entrepreneurship in India. There are many parameters for which data is not available. Second is provide better support across all critical needs of the entrepreneurs, because successful entrepreneurship is a function of all of these 6 critical needs. And last but not the least is that every stakeholder should ask themselves the right questions. If you are an incubator accelerator, ask yourself how many women do you have in your cohorts. If you are a banker, ask how many women did you fund in this quarter and how many are you going to fund this year. So ask the right questions.
Thank you. And with that, I'd just like to thank everyone on the panel. Thank you for a really engaging discussion. And I hope we can continue with these themes through the rest of the day today and tomorrow
So
as well.
thank you so much, our esteemed panelists. I would just like to request you to wait for the picture, for the group picture, and we also would like to felicitate you with a token of our appreciation. So thank you so much. The session has indeed been extremely fruitful. It has definitely reinforced the need to broaden our understanding of women entrepreneurship, looking at things from a gender lens, and also be mindful of the barriers that women face while designing schemes and programs, be it procurement policy or the need to have the gender segregated data, recognizing the potential of women-led businesses, the need to address not just the entry barriers, but also the sustenance barriers. It is also about addressing the social norms and to also look at the entire continuum from enterprise promotion, skilling, reskilling, mentoring, networking, access to markets, access to finance, providing care infrastructure. So we have a long way to go. I would request you to give everybody a huge round of applause. I once again thank our dear panelists that they have taken time out to be here. We are also going to be breaking for a short networking break of about 15 minutes. And the tea is served at the place where we had our lunch. And we would reconvene at 3:45 p.m. for the next session.